I'd just like to make the point that we're very fortunate that His Majesty has allowed us to use Buckingham Palace for this event.
The appointment was supposed to take less than 5 minutes. A signature, a sealed announcement, and Camilla's son would enter royal life under the protection of the crown. But before King Charles could place his pen on the page, Princess Anne stepped forward and stopped the decision cold. What followed was not merely a disagreement between siblings. It was a direct challenge over who could be elevated, who had the authority to decide, and whether family loyalty had finally gone too far. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles summoned several trusted senior aides to Buckingham Palace because he wanted the matter settled before consultation could slow it down. The proposed royal patronage, an official charitable role carried under palace approval, would place Tom Parker Bowles beside food and heritage organizations, allow him into royal briefings, and give him a connection to the crown despite holding no constitutional duty. Anne entered before the signature. She crossed the room, placed one hand over the folder, and told her brother he could not appoint Camilla's son without council approval and consultation with the working royal family, meaning relatives who perform official duties for the monarch. The king froze. Then he lowered the pen and asked whether she was challenging his judgment. His sister did not retreat. She told him she was protecting him from a decision that could look less like service and more like private favor. Camilla remained seated, but her face tightened. She understood that Anne had questioned more than procedure. The princess had questioned whether Tom belonged inside the machinery of royal life at all. Anne then revealed how far the plan had moved. William had not been consulted. Edward had not been informed. The palace committee responsible for reviewing appointments had not seen the papers. Yet the announcement was prepared, the language approved, and the silver pen placed beside the page as though every objection had been defeated. A senior private secretary closed the doors. No announcement, Anne declared, would leave the palace until every line had been carefully examined. Charles looked toward Camilla, then back at the woman who had served beside him for decades. Nobody spoke. At last, the monarch pushed the pen away, and the scrape across the table sounded like a verdict. But Anne's resistance had not begun there. Weeks earlier, one private ceremony involving Camilla's son had convinced her that an invisible boundary was already being crossed. To understand why she confronted the king before his closest advisors, the fears carried by everyone around that table must first be understood. For Charles, the unsigned document represented more than a patronage. It was a chance to give Camilla's son a place of dignity inside the world that had defined and often judged their family. For Camilla, it was recognition long denied. But for Anne, the same page represented a boundary being quietly erased. Each person entered the confrontation carrying a different wound, and none of them could admit just how personal the decision had already become. Charles had never viewed the proposal as a grand elevation. He saw it as a controlled way to use Tom Parker Bowles's professional experience in charitable service, without granting him a royal title, public funding, or any place in the line of succession the formal order deciding who may inherit the throne. To the king, the limits were clear. To everyone else, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Tom had spent years building a career beyond palace duty, yet every invitation still carried the shadow of his mother. Success looked borrowed. Access looked inherited. Even ordinary appearances were judged through his connection to the queen consort, and Camilla had watched that suspicion follow him for years. She believed the patronage might finally allow his work to stand beside the crown with dignity rather than beneath it with embarrassment. Anne saw danger where Camilla saw fairness. She had given decades to public duty without demanding royal advancement for her own children. That history shaped her anger. The monarchy, in her view, survived because affection stopped where responsibility began. And once that line weakened, every private relationship could become a claim on public privilege. Before the meeting, Princess Anne stood alone in a palace corridor and reread the appointment summary. Her expression changed when she reached the sentence allowing Tom to represent the monarch at selected events. Representing the sovereign meant appearing in an official capacity on behalf of the king, not merely attending as a guest. She read the line twice. Then she folded the paper and walked inside. Charles expected understanding from the sister who had defended him through years of pressure. Her refusal wounded him because it came from the person whose loyalty he trusted most. Yet Anne's concern was no longer private. William had sent a carefully worded note, asking why someone outside the working royal family, the relatives who perform official duties, would speak for the sovereign. Edward had also warned that one exception could invite demands from other relatives, seeking patronages, ceremonial roles, or palace-backed influence. Camilla approached Anne after the meeting and lowered her voice. She asked whether the objection was truly about procedure. The princess held her gaze and answered, "It became about principle the moment the crown was used to settle a family grievance." The words landed hard. But they also pointed backward, toward the real beginning of the crisis. The appointment had not started with an unsigned document at Buckingham Palace. It had started at a private ceremony, where one unexpected introduction convinced Anne that Tom was already being treated as though the role belonged to him. 3 weeks before Anne stopped the king's pen, a small gathering at Highgrove appeared harmless. There were no grand announcements, no cameras inside the room, and no reason for the guests to expect controversy. Then Camilla's son was introduced using words that had never been authorized. Anne heard the phrase, watched Charles remain silent, and understood immediately that the proposed patronage might already be functioning in practice. From that moment, the future confrontation was no longer avoidable. It was only waiting for a date. Charles had invited representatives from rural charities, culinary education programs, agricultural groups, and organizations hoping to work more closely with royal foundations. A royal foundation is a charity connected to senior members of the family and supported by their public influence. The reception was intended to feel useful, private, and controlled. Nothing about it suggested a battle was about to begin. Tom Parker Bowles attended because of his professional experience in food and publishing. He arrived as a guest, not as a royal figure, and his presence caused little concern. Then a senior organizer stepped forward and introduced him as the Queen's representative and the future royal patron guiding this initiative. Anne turned toward Charles at once. The king heard every word. He could have corrected the introduction in seconds, but he did not. Instead, he offered a restrained smile and allowed Tom to continue speaking. That silence changed everything. To the princess, it did not feel like politeness. It felt like consent. Camilla noticed her reaction and approached her later, insisting that the organizer had simply become overenthusiastic. The queen consort tried to dismiss the wording as harmless, but Anne refused to let it pass. She told her that accidental titles were corrected immediately when the credibility of the monarchy was at risk. Camilla answered that Tom had done nothing wrong. Anne agreed, but warned that this was precisely why the palace should not place him inside a role that had never been approved. The unease deepened after the guests departed. Anne received briefing notes that had already circulated among several charities. Those papers described Tom as a likely palace-backed figure who could attend events on behalf of the king. One aide later admitted in a documented account of the reception that the language had come from a draft proposal prepared within Charles and Camilla's household. Anne sat alone that evening with the event program beside her. She circled the words, "Special Representative," and wrote beneath them, "No authority given." Charles telephoned soon afterward and urged his sister not to turn a misunderstanding into a constitutional dispute. She answered that it became constitutional the moment nobody corrected it. A constitutional dispute meant a conflict over how royal authority could properly be used. From that night, Anne began collecting every approval requirement. Charles moved faster to complete the appointment. By the time he called the signing meeting, she was no longer coming to ask questions. She was arriving with proof, procedure, and a refusal strong enough to divide the room. The doors were closed. The advisors had stopped writing. Charles stood behind the table with the appointment page before him, while Anne remained on the opposite side with one hand resting firmly on the folder. There were no cameras, no crowds, and no ceremonial smiles to soften what came next. A brother demanded respect for his authority. A sister demanded restraint from the crown. And between them sat Camilla, watching her husband and his most trusted sibling turn loyalty into a weapon. Charles ordered the junior staff to leave. Only Anne, Camilla, the private secretary, and a constitutional advisor remained. A constitutional advisor is an official who explains how royal power must operate within accepted rules and limits. The king argued that royal patronages ultimately existed under the sovereign's authority, and that choosing who supported national causes belonged within his right to shape the monarchy. His sister did not move. Charles stepped around the table, and asked whether she truly intended to stop him from helping his wife's son. Anne answered that she intended to stop him from making a private family favor appear to be a royal duty. The accusation struck hard. The monarch's voice sharpened as he accused her of humiliating Camilla and treating Tom as though he had done something wrong, simply by being connected to the queen. Anne replied that Tom was not the central problem. The danger came from using the institution to heal private wounds that the crown could never safely repair. Camilla rose slowly. Her eyes filled, but her voice remained controlled. She told Anne that her children had never asked to become royal. They had only wanted to stop being treated as though their connection to her was something shameful. The queen consort insisted that Tom's experience made him suitable, and she asked why fairness for him was being described as favoritism. Anne's answer was firm. Suitability was not enough when the role allowed someone to speak on behalf of the sovereign. The constitutional advisor then confirmed that Charles could support a new patronage, but allowing Tom to represent the king would require consultation, written limits, and approval from the palace bodies responsible for official duties. The room tightened again. Anne produced the unauthorized charity briefing and placed it beside the appointment page. The paper already described Tom as a future royal representative. Charles lifted it, read the highlighted words, and crushed one corner between his fingers before demanding to know who had approved its circulation. Camilla insisted she knew nothing about the wording. Anne believed her, but said ignorance could not erase the damage. The appointment had to stop until responsibility was established. Charles refused to withdraw it permanently. Instead, he ordered an immediate review. The shouting ended, but the struggle did not. It moved into the quieter machinery of royal authority, where influence could be exercised without anyone raising their voice. Royal power does not always announce itself with a command. Sometimes it appears in a delayed memorandum, a missing signature, or a meeting from which one crucial person has been excluded. After Anne stopped the appointment, the battle shifted into that hidden world. Charles remained sovereign. Camilla remained queen. Yet neither could make the controversy disappear, because the monarchy's strength depended on more than one person's desire, and Anne knew exactly which doors had to remain closed. Charles allowed the review to begin, but every new question made the original plan harder to defend. Legal, financial, charitable, and reputational advisors examined the proposed patronage because it involved more than an honorary association, a ceremonial connection in which a public figure supports a cause without exercising formal power. Tom could still help charities privately. The real danger lay in allowing him to appear as a representative of the sovereign. The king still held the highest symbolic authority, but his advisors warned that forcing the appointment through could damage cooperation among the working royals and deepen accusations of favoritism. Anne held no greater constitutional rank than before, yet her influence came from something more difficult to challenge. Decades of service, public discipline, and her refusal to seek special advancement for her own children gave her objection unusual force. William entered the private review carrying Anne's marked briefing. He sat in silence before saying that the future monarchy could not inherit obligations created to satisfy present family tensions. Charles stared at his son and asked whether he was supporting his aunt against him. The prince chose every word carefully. He said he was supporting a process the king should never be seen to bypass. Camilla faced a different kind of pressure. She privately asked a senior aide whether Tom's name could be removed from the review papers before the dispute caused further humiliation. The queen consort hoped retreat might protect him, but the aide explained that too many organizations had already received planning guidance. She turned away without answering. The review then uncovered something worse. Financial advisors found that several charities had begun restructuring future events around Tom's expected palace role. Dates had been reserved, invitations had been drafted, informal assurances had clearly been given months earlier. One name began appearing behind those assurances, a member of Charles's household who believed the king had already decided and treated formal approval as a mere delay. The discovery transformed concern into suspicion. Anne slid the unsigned appointment back across the table and told her brother he could proceed only after every duty, limit, and approval had been recorded. Charles did not touch it. Until then, Tom had existed inside the dispute as a name on paper. Once he learned how far the plan had advanced, the consequences moved from royal procedure into a mother's private life. Tom Parker Bowles did not learn that his appointment had been stopped from the king. He learned when his mother asked him to come privately and closed the door before speaking. The position meant to honor his work had become evidence in a struggle over royal favoritism, authority, and trust. As Camilla explained Anne's intervention, the anger he might have shown never came. Instead, he asked one devastating question. Had the palace ever wanted him there, or had the entire idea belonged only to Charles and Camilla? Camilla summoned him to a private sitting room at Clarence House before palace staff or public speculation could reach him. She explained that the appointment had not been rejected, only frozen while approval procedures and unauthorized charity briefings were investigated. A formal review meant palace officials would examine how the role was created, who approved its duties, and whether anyone had acted beyond their authority. Tom listened without interrupting. Then he removed a prepared patronage speech from his jacket and placed it face down on the table. He told the queen consort that he had never asked to represent the sovereign. He had believed the position was about food education and charitable work, not entry into the monarchy's internal hierarchy. Camilla admitted what she had hoped to achieve. She wanted her son's work to receive respect after years of suspicion and mockery. Tom answered that royal recognition gained through family influence could become another kind of public punishment. Every achievement would be dismissed as borrowed. Every appearance would be treated as proof of privilege. Tom then asked whether Anne had objected to him personally. Camilla hesitated. That brief silence wounded him more than any direct answer. He walked away and said he would not become the reason his mother was isolated inside the family. The truth then became worse. Tom revealed that an aide had already discussed dates for him to accompany Charles on regional engagements. He had also been told the final signature was guaranteed, and objections from other royals would change nothing. The king had not known those promises were made, but their existence confirmed Anne's fear that the process had been manipulated. Charles removed the aide from appointment duties pending an internal inquiry. The decision embarrassed the monarch, yet showed how far the plan had advanced behind closed doors. Camilla reached for the discarded speech. Tom placed his hand over it and asked her not to keep words written for a role that might never have belonged to him. His withdrawal looked like Anne's victory, but it left Charles furious and opened the way for a private meeting no palace advisor could control. Anne expected resistance when Tom asked to see her. She expected anger, accusation, perhaps even a demand that she explain why she had publicly wounded his mother. Instead, he arrived alone and made no attempt to defend the appointment. There were no secretaries taking notes, and no palace officials controlling the conversation. For the first time, the controversy was stripped of titles and procedure. Anne saw not Camilla's son or Charles's proposed patron, but a man trapped inside a decision made around him. Tom Parker Bowles had requested the meeting at St. James's Palace and insisted that no aides, advisors, or members of either household attend. A private audience was simply a closed meeting held without the wider palace team present. Anne agreed because she needed to know whether he had helped accelerate the appointment or had merely trusted a process presented to him as complete. Tom entered carrying the original draft of his duties. He did not offer it for inspection. Instead, he tore the page once through the middle and placed both halves on the table. The gesture said what months of briefings had failed to say. The roll had already damaged more than it promised to repair. He told Anne that stopping the signature had hurt, but it had also been right. He should never have been introduced as a royal representative before the family and the proper committees had agreed. The title had begun to speak for him before he had even decided whether he wanted it. Anne listened without interrupting. Then she admitted that her intervention had been aimed at Charles's process, not at Tom's character. She acknowledged that the deepest humiliation had fallen on the person with the least control. The admission mattered because it separated his worth from the mistake made around him. Tom asked whether she would ever have accepted the appointment under tighter limits. Anne looked at the torn paper and answered carefully. She could support charitable work, she could support food education, public service, and independent leadership. What she could not support was an undefined role that blurred family connection with royal authority. Tom then disclosed, during that private conversation, that he had repeatedly asked for narrower wording. An aide had insisted that a direct link to the king would make the patronage stronger, easier to promote, and harder for charities to refuse. That revelation confirmed what Anne had feared from the beginning. Anne offered a new path. Tom could serve as an independent ambassador, meaning a public supporter with no authority to represent the sovereign, use royal facilities, or carry a palace designation. Tom accepted at once, but on two conditions. The statement had to make clear that he had chosen independence himself, and Camilla could not be blamed for the failed appointment. Anne gathered the torn halves and placed them together. She said the monarchy sometimes protected people by refusing to give them what it believed they needed. They had found common ground, but peace still depended on Charles accepting a settlement that removed the very royal recognition he had wanted to give. By sunrise, the argument was no longer confined to palace rooms. The halted signature had become the nation's dominant royal story, dividing broadcasters, newspapers, and crowds over whether Anne had defended the monarchy or defied the king. Every silence was interpreted. Every arrival was examined. Yet one front page captured the conflict with brutal simplicity. An image of Charles's abandoned silver pen beside the words, "Anne draws the line." Suddenly, the royal household was no longer deciding only Tom's future. It was defending its own credibility. Palace communications staff released a restrained statement confirming that the proposed patronage remained under review and that no appointment had been approved. A patronage is an official connection through which a public figure supports a charity or national cause. The statement avoided Tom's name in its final sentence, and that omission immediately fueled speculation that the original plan had already collapsed. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace as a broadcaster delivered a live report beneath the words, "Royal appointment blocked." Several people held newspapers carrying the image of the abandoned pen. One evening program praised Anne for putting service before family privilege. Another commentator warned that her intervention exposed a dangerous division around the king. Charles watched the coverage alone. He remained still while reporters debated Tom's suitability, but his expression hardened when the discussion shifted toward his own judgment as monarch. The king switched off the television before the segment ended, yet the silence that followed offered no escape from what had already been said. Camilla received photographs of the newspaper covers on her phone. She paused over an image of her son entering Clarence's house and told a nearby aide that Tom must not become a symbol in a battle he had never chosen. The queen consort feared the role intended to honor him had instead made him the face of royal favoritism. Public support for Anne continued to grow because the controversy touched a simple question of fairness. Should proximity to the monarch create official opportunities unavailable to everyone else? Palace journalists then disclosed, through copies of circulated briefing papers, that more organizations had received advance guidance than officials first admitted. A return to the original appointment now seemed almost impossible. William and Edward backed the independent ambassador compromise. The prince believed it protected the future monarchy, while his uncle saw it as the only path that avoided creating a damaging precedent. Anne supported the settlement but insisted the final announcement must defend proper approval without humiliating Charles. The king received the proposed statement and read Tom's request to remain independent. Charles then used the same silver pen he had once been prevented from lifting and drew a line through the words, "Royal Patron." With the nation watching and his family waiting, he returned to the unsigned document not to complete the appointment, but to decide what kind of king the abandoned signature would reveal. Charles returned to the same table where the crisis had begun. The silver pen was waiting, but the original appointment was no longer placed beneath it. In its place sat a short statement confirming that Tom Parker Bowles would support the charities independently, without royal status, palace authority, or permission to represent the sovereign. Anne stood nearby, prepared for one final clash. Instead, the king looked at his sister, acknowledged that the process had moved too far without approval, and signed the document that ended his own proposal. Charles formally withdrew the plan to make Tom an official royal patron and approved the independent ambassador arrangement created during Anne's private meeting with him. An independent ambassador is a public supporter who promotes a cause without holding palace office or speaking for the monarch. Tom could use his professional experience to help the charities, but he would undertake no royal engagement and carry no formal designation from the crown. The king closed the original appointment folder and handed it to his private secretary. He instructed that it be archived as withdrawn, not postponed. That distinction mattered. Postponement would have left the door open. Withdrawal ended the plan completely. Charles then spoke privately to Anne and admitted that his desire to protect Camilla's family had moved faster than the safeguards designed to protect the monarchy. The confession cost him pride, but it restored something more valuable: control over his judgment. Anne told her brother that stopping him had never been an act of disloyalty. It was the same loyalty he had depended upon throughout their lives. the kind willing to risk affection rather than allow a preventable mistake. Camilla accepted the revised arrangement only after Tom assured her that independence was not rejection. The queen consort finally understood that forcing royal recognition upon her son would have made his achievements appear borrowed from her position. Tom later confirmed through a public statement that his charitable work would remain personal and professional. By refusing the royal label, he reclaimed the very reputation the appointment had nearly damaged. Charles and Camilla later met Anne without advisors present. No grand apology followed. The king poured his sister tea, and the queen thanked her for ensuring that Tom received a choice rather than merely an appointment. The crisis delivered its final verdict. The crown is not strengthened when every royal desire becomes policy. It is strengthened when authority accepts restraint, when families speak difficult truths, and when service matters more than access. Anne did not weaken Charles's reign. She prevented a private act of affection from becoming a permanent public liability. The king lost the appointment he wanted, but recovered the judgment expected of him. The silver pen remained on the table beside the empty space where Tom's appointment once waited. The signature was never written, yet that refusal protected them all. In the end, Anne did not stop Charles from honoring Camilla's son. She stopped the crown from defining him and reminded the king that the deepest loyalty is sometimes the hand that prevents a signature. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.